Thank you for joining us for Small Talks for Big Change, where we help simplify financial topics to help with your financial wellness. Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Farrell, and I will be your host today, joined by the radiant Michele Enriquez. Michele, how are you doing today?
Happy New Year, Andrew.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
We said this on the first podcast of season 2.
Yeah.
How long do you have before you have to stop saying Happy New Year?
That's a great question. I think because this is the first podcast of the year, we can get away with it. But we are, 2 weeks into the new year? So I think we're starting to move away from that acceptable time range.
Yeah. Maybe just not to exceed 1 month.
I think that's probably fair.
Okay.
That's fair. Speaking of New Year, though, today we are going to be talking about something that I think a lot of people struggle with. I think a lot of people get in their heads about or maybe overthink a little bit, and that's going to be New Year's resolutions. Michele, are you a big New Year's resolutions girl?
I am a New Year's resolutions person.
Okay.
But I feel like 2026 is that 1 year where people are wanting to catapult it or start it or get rid of 2025 as fast as possible. How do you feel about that?
And just leave it in the rearview mirror. Yeah, I agree.
Leave it behind as quick as possible.
I have never been the biggest New Year's resolution person, leading up to maybe a year or two ago. My partner really does a lot of them. We'll set 15 every year. So I'm trying to keep up a little bit. But I do want to start by talking about, I guess, the why behind why a lot of people feel like it's such a big thing or why they get in their head so much about it. I feel like when January comes, even though it really is just another month, it kind of feels like it's this big fresh start. We have this illusion that we have to reinvent ourselves. I think with other people starting their New Year's resolutions, social comparison can be at a big all-time high. And I think a lot of times at the beginning of the year when our motivation is super, super strong, we can overestimate our willpower and we can underestimate how real life can actually get in the way of setting our goals and things like that. Have you ever, since you've been doing a lot of New Year's resolutions, set a goal for yourself that has been super unrealistic or really hard to achieve based on just real life factors?
I think I have. I always usually have a physical and a financial goal.
Okay.
And my financial goals got completely derailed early on last year. Last podcast I had talked about a layoff in our family and it happened right out 2 weeks into the new year. So that got derailed real quick and I didn't have a backup plan.
Okay.
But other than that, I feel like I set, for the most part, realistic goals. So not too many challenges. Yeah. I think people are trying to get so far away from 2025 and catapult forward in 2026 and really not setting up a plan to meet their goals. And, when you don't have clearly defined goals and you don't have a clear path, you can get lost along the way and that will completely derail you from your end goal. So say, for instance, you are wanting to go on a trip in the summer and you've got the motivation for it. And, you're verbalizing it with your, say, a friend group, but you haven't really thought out the steps to get there. So maybe you've got to apply for a passport and maybe you got to do the research and get the pricing done early. And maybe you got to book the time off and find childcare or whatever. Those are steps that need to be plotted. So, in haste and out of rush, you may forget to kind of plot the pieces in order to get there. I think that's where a lot of people kind of fall off track and just give up with their goals completely.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of goes back to, we've talked about it before, but SMART goals. When you go through every step of the SMART process, the A is attainable. And that's where you ask yourself those questions. How do I actually go about attaining this goal? And a lot of times it's not just setting dollar amount aside. It's, like you said, handling healthcare, childcare, handling booking the reservations, handling putting your PTO in. These are all things that you need to consider when you're setting any kind of goal for yourself, not just a financial one, is making it very, very defined and making sure you understand all the steps that go into it.
Yeah, there's also setting targets that are probably out of reach, just not being realistic with what you want to achieve that year. I think we see this a lot with physical and health goals where, you want to lose a bunch of weight where, realistically, maybe at your age, 5 pounds is probably the right target versus the 20 you might want to lose.
I think when we set these resolutions, a lot of people set them for who they aspire to be and not where they currently are. healthcare and fitness is a very big one for that. And I'm guilty of this every single
Me too.
year. I tell myself like, okay, this is the year I'm going to really start being better. And it starts with like, I'm going to run 5 miles. And it's like, I've never ran 5 miles. I don't run unless I'm being chased. Like, but I'm not going to like jump right to that. It's about like starting small where you currently are, run until you're tired, and then build off of that. So I think people need to, a lot of times when they're setting goals, not only like you said, define them, but just take into consideration that they are not necessarily where they are wanting to be yet. That's why they're setting this resolution and the goal. You meet yourself where you currently are.
Yeah. And you also, just before we started recording, we're talking about all this cooking that you've been doing, baking that you've been doing. So
speaking of, let's talk about our New Year's resolutions this year. So you said you normally do like a physical one and a mental one. Do you have 2 that you've set for yourself this year?
This is kind of financial, but like heavily inspired by some events last year.
Yeah.
So 2 of our friends on our team last year retired, Miss Peggy Wyman and Miss Veronica Dangerfield. Woo, hey guys. But my mom also retired in May, and like just seeing them through that experience and like hearing from them and how happy they are and them doing all of those things that they've been waiting to do once they've finished work really just got me thinking more and more about retirement and like really what that looks like. So along these lines of making lists and planning, I started to think about like, okay, like what age is that for me? And it could be 17 and a half if I retired like right at the time that I could to receive benefits, but it could be 20, it could be 30 if I wanted to. So like, I feel like with retirement, it's hard to set clearly defined goals because there's also things like what dollar amount do I have to get to feel comfortable to retire? And I think for me in my situation, I've got 2 kids that are going to go to college soon. And I think especially with college, those costs like could vary really greatly. They could go for free. They could not go at all, or they could go through master's programs where we're supporting them through that. And that could mean the difference of like $250,000.
And then factoring in books, room and board, like you don't know where their living situation is going to be like. It can be a giant question mark.
Totally.
For sure.
So I thought, okay, instead of overwhelming myself with all of the what ifs and like 10 different scenarios that I could map out, why don't I just start off by doing a couple things? Why don't I first understand like what percentage I'm contributing of my paycheck to my retirement? And I didn't know that. And actually, the rabbit hole of going to our company's like portal to go find out what I had signed up for.
It was like 5 different logins you need for it.
Yeah. And then figuring out like what your employer may match and like figuring all that out. So just understanding what you're contributing and then maybe doing the math there. And I did that portion, so I had like a baseline understanding.
Yeah.
But then I also made it a goal to say, hey, I can probably afford to put a little bit more. So I've said, okay, if I do have any kind of merit increase or some kind of like change in income this year, I am going to increase it just a little bit. So just 2 goals, just like go figure out what my current situation is and then figure out what steps I need to do to increase it if and when the time comes.
And that falls right into what you were just talking about is like researching the retirement situation helps you then make a defined goal, and then you made one that is realistic within your current finances, so you're set up for success there.
I have a 3rd goal to seek out a financial advisor this year too, because kind of like in this process I got totally overwhelmed and I'm like, I need an accountability partner. I need an expert to help me and just like calm my nerves, because I'm also like a super type A planner and like have to have control, and like I feel like with this it's just there's too many probabilities that are giving me anxiety, frankly.
I just have like so many questions about things like that if I don't have all of them answered, I'm like, well, then it's not worth dealing with. So I think having someone who is an expert in that field who can answer all those questions and kind of hold your hand through it is another great step.
And if you've got some resolutions out there that are complicated, maybe like that, then like take a step back and find some help, seek out some help.
See, my resolutions are much less complicated. I also have a financial one and like a non-financial one, but even the non-financial ones, there's still like the money side attached to it. So my financial New Year's resolution is dine out once a week max. And that is kind of where I have set my limit, because for me, I tend to have to set very black and white rules for myself. If I give myself an inch or I give myself any gray area, like I just know myself, I will like manipulate my own brain into being like, it's fine. So I've said, if it's on my dime, like if we go out today and you're paying, then that's quite all right. But like if I'm paying for food, once a week is my max for dining out for any meal, and I'm going to stick to that this year. My other one, my non-financial one, is like you mentioned earlier, I'm trying to take up baking this year, which has been really fun. I've been pretty successful with it, but like I remember when I was first trying to set this for myself and like going down the rabbit hole on Instagram of what people are baking and different recipes and whatnot. I got on Instagram and I added a stand mixer, like a proofing tool. I added a bowl scraper. I added a Dutch oven. I added like a Banneton bowl. I added all this stuff to my cart, and the total was like $400. And I'm like, okay, let me just slow down, because again, I think a lot of people also, when they set these goals for themselves, they bite off way more than they can chew, or it becomes so overblown in their head that it's the candle burns too brightly. It's too much all at once. And so I'm like, let me just slow down. I went through everything and I'm like, I don't actually need any of this stuff right now. Let me just take baby steps, see if this is a habit I'm actually going to stick with. And then if it is, I will buy things as I need as time goes on. I did get the stand mixer though, and I've used it 3 times. So I think that so far has been a good purchase.
We did talk about kitchen utensils last podcast also.
It's hard, I go down the rabbit hole with it. But I'm just trying to be a little bit more, set smaller goals that I think are more attainable for myself, and also try not to, overblow them too much in my head, because if it becomes too big of a thing, then it's like, what is it? The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Like the more disappointing it'll be if any setbacks happen. So I'm just trying to be a little more chill about it while still maintaining, some discipline.
I'm proud of you for being realistic too, because you can't have a baking goal and some kind of physical goal. That would have been really hard.
Well, I still do have like the light physical goal, but that's funny you mentioned that, because I changed that this year too. And my physical goal this year is to it started off was I want to close my rings on my Apple Watch every day. It's been 12 days. I've done it so far. Today, I don't know if I'm going to, just because life happens. Like my schedule today is a busy one. So I think also when you're creating these goals for yourself, like expecting and planning for setbacks or for it to not be perfect is also really, really important, because, old Andrew would have been like, oh, well, I've already failed this goal 13 days in, so what's the point in continuing?
Totally.
It's like, just allow yourself to have the ebbs and flows, because that's just what happens with life. Like we can't predict every variable of it.
People, be kind in the process.
And that is actually going to bring me to another point that I want to talk about. So we're just me talking about like how I'm wanting to start the baking, for example, or like starting the exercise. I think a lot of people feel like they need that same level of motivation they have when they like first set their goal for themselves is something they have to maintain throughout the entire process. And that's not true. There is a difference between motivation and momentum. And I was reading about this when I was like drafting up the outline for this podcast here. So motivation is defined as the reason for someone to act/behave in a certain way / a general desire or willingness for someone to do something. Momentum, force or speed of movement, the driving force gained by the development of a process or course of an event. So essentially, motivation is that like initial spark or feeling that makes you want to start, while momentum is the like self-sustaining force of small, consistent actions that keep you going on your goal. So for example, if your goal is to like be better with budgeting, the motivation is like to download the budgeting app, to get started, to import your finances. And then, that level of fire when you start doesn't have to be maintained throughout the entire process. It's just about finding like small actionable steps that you can maintain and a pace that you can actually maintain. So like if I were to have bought $400 worth of baking stuff without thinking about it, I can't maintain that for the rest of the year. I had to like make myself slow down. So the momentum and the pace is something that like you can keep sustainable throughout the full year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you buy the $400 worth of stuff?
I bought a stand mixer, and I also did make myself wait, not 30 days. I made myself wait like until I needed it, though. There was a recipe I wanted to do that said need it for 20 minutes. I'm like, I'm not doing that by hand.
Yeah.
I bought an inexpensive stand mixer.
Good job,
And
Andrew.
everything else is still in my save for later.
Proud of you.
Yeah.
I actually see momentum and motivation as like two completely different things.
For
and
sure.
Things that don't like exist together
Mm-hmm.
either. I see motivation as something that exists with no end. And motivation to me is more like big picture. That's the goalpost.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end zone, like whatever you want to call it, where I am a big believer in momentum. I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
And momentum is really what carries athletes through the game, through the competition.
For sure.
And, when all cylinders are firing at the same time, you can really be unstoppable. Momentum is really hard to stop.
Yeah.
But with momentum, there's a time limit.
Yeah.
And, if you think about the adage of, it's a marathon, not a race,
Mm-hmm.
and pacing yourself, I think momentum is important to think about, when you talk about resolutions and like over the course of a year. But motivation is that completely separate thing that you're driving towards. So more like momentum is kind of driving you towards your motivation.
Yeah. It goes back to also like what we were talking about earlier, having your big picture goal that is, defined, and then the momentum being the things you can do, the steps you can take in order to attain that. I also had something that when you were talking about your retirement, I do not understand all of our retirement portal. I'll be totally honest. I log in there and there's like a pie chart, and then it's like your money's being invested here. I don't know any of that. I do know I can see like what I'm contributing. So I also, my dad has told me since I was a kid that one of his bigger regrets was not saving for retirement when he was younger. Luckily, he had a job that had like a pension, so he was still fine. But I think a lot of people when I talk to, it's, they don't start saving for retirement until they are close to retirement age.
I heard a lot.
And so what I'm doing right now, my big picture, my motivation is to be able to retire. I don't have an age in mind because like we just talked about, it's hard to predict, but like I don't want to be 85, 90 years old still working. So my momentum for that, all I can do at least right now that's not going to overwhelm me is whenever I get any kind of merit increase, whenever I start earning more money, I just log in and increase it 1 or 2%.
Yep.
Those are the steps that I can take right now in order to keep that going. And it's a small step. I don't really see it that much in my paycheck, but it's at least keeping the habit like in my mind and keeping me in the habit of being mindful about my retirement so that hopefully when the time comes, I'll be, in a better place than I would be otherwise.
Yeah. I also found out that it had been 5 years since I've been here that I haven't increased it. It's been the same percentage from when I started. Yeah. And I think it could be a good habit to increase it just slightly every year if you can, or every time you get one of those opportunities to do so.
Even if it's just like 1 or 2%, like you won't really see that on your paycheck, but in the long term, it will pay dividends when you reach retirement age.
As evidenced by our friends that are enjoying their best lives right now. That's my motivation.
Veronica, when on her last day here, she left the office and went to the airport. and like I'm trying to also be on that page
my motivation
when
right
I'm
there.
done, when I'm at retirement age.
Sure.
All right, so let's talk about building habits that can stick. So we've talked about this, how we can create, small steps for yourself and, make your habits defined, make them realistic, whatever. Do you have just like tips and tricks on how to build sustainable long-term habits, whether it's something just for the year that you want to do for yourself or like a New Year's resolution goal or a long-term habit you want to, carry with you for the rest of your life? What kind of tips and tricks does the incomparable Michele Enriquez have for our listeners?
I promised you I wouldn't talk about budgeting for 5 more episodes. I won't do it. I'm not doing it today. I talked about it like 5 times last podcast. But I'm going to talk about this idea of manifestation.
Ooh.
Because I was also like super inspired by you and Veronica, our last podcast episode. And we joke a lot about like how kumbaya it can sound, right? But we take our inspiration from Veronica, our programming. I take inspiration from you, and who talk about it a lot. And like along these lines of motivation and goals and planning, manifestation actually is the process of making something real. So where you might make lists for other tangible things, like you can set a process through manifestation by writing it down, sharing it with a friend, repeating it as much as possible and as often as possible. And even if it's in jest, so it's real.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of, manifestation, because this is where you can take something that you feel is unattainable and like make it a big goal.
Yeah.
So adding this onto your like tangible, realistic goals, throwing one big like dream big goal out there through this power of manifestation.
Yeah.
You and I are big proponents of support mechanisms through our work here, and we help triage members and community members to help them realize their financial goals.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's just verbalizing what that is, getting them to realize what those are. And we rely on people to tell us what those goals are. So this habit of verbalizing, putting it out there in the universe, asking for support, and dreaming big, I think is something we can add to those kind of tangible goals that we do all the time.
When I was in like grade school, we had, those like posters they have on the wall that have like, you can do it. There's always the one that it really stuck with me. That was like, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. That's how I feel about like these things like this, is that manifestation is a little woo-woo-y, and I don't think I'm necessarily that kind of person, but sometimes I am a little bit. But with manifestation, I really don't think that it's like this magic thing that people build it up to be. It really is just like when you have a mindset shift, you then start behaving in a different way, which then gets you the intended results. Like if you're someone who's trying to get better with budgeting, if you just tell yourself like, I am someone who's good with budgeting, I'm someone who makes good financial decisions, you will have a mindset shift to where you'll feel a little bit different about like overspending at Starbucks or at Target or wherever. So I'm a big proponent of manifestation as well. I'm glad you brought that up. Just
the opposite can happen too. If you continually say you're going to fail or you can't do it, then that's probably going to happen too.
You don't want to be in that mindset. That is a negative one, because it's you do get what you put out into the universe, I feel. I had a couple little like smaller tips and tricks that are a little bit less big picture than that, but I think that habit stacking is a really good idea. So if you are someone who has the goal maybe to like watch less TV, if you every morning drink your cup of coffee and sit down and watch TV, read a book instead. Like use it with take your, cup of coffee in the morning, but instead of sitting on the couch for 30 minutes and watching something, go outside, go for a walk, read a book, replace that with an existing habit that you have that'll make it easier to build off of. So habit stacking is a really good one. Starting small, we've talked about this a lot, but the smaller your goals are, the more likely you are to achieve them. But then once you achieve that goal, it's like positive reinforcement. You're like, oh, I just did that. You feel really good. You feel more motivated to then set, increasingly larger goals. So bringing it back to budgeting or finance again, if you have a goal to save more money or to cut costs or whatever, don't immediately cut out like, I'm not going to dine out, I'm not going to do this, whatever. Maybe something as small as like going through your monthly subscriptions and saying, I don't need to pay for all 8 of these streaming services. I can take out 2 of them. Start something small like that and then build from there. It's just about kind of building these things into your existing life, seeing the success that you get from these small goals and letting that kind of motivation build then, good momentum for you to continue with these habits moving forward.
I think that's so smart, because my big overwhelming retirement goal really just started with me like first finding on our intranet what I was currently contributing. That didn't take 5 minutes. Like that might be something you might not need to add to the goal, because it's not an accomplishment, but it took me long enough to feel like
an accomplishment. Yeah, exactly. And then you're in the mindset of like, okay, now I can do this. Now I've done it. It's done. I have the access. I know what to do moving forward.
I like that.
I like that too. All right. Now I'm going to ask you one final question, and this could be something that you have talked about earlier that you just really want to drive home. It could be a new point, but if there's our listeners who are listening who you want to give just one singular takeaway, one final piece of advice, one kind of like prevailing idea through the ideas of setting goals
Yeah.
or setting resolutions for the new year, what would that be?
I would say getting comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, you know, with any kind of goal setting or reaching toward a target, winning, whatever you want to call it, like it's going to take work and it's probably going to be hard. And I think where most people fail is just giving up in the process.
Yeah.
So an acknowledgement just at the beginning that, hey, this might be hard.
Yes.
But I'm going to stick with it because I know what my motivation is and I know what that end, reward is going to be. I'm taking my daughter's softball team through this off-season physical fitness. They're only 10. Some of them are 11. But at the end of it, they're always telling me like, oh, I'm so sore and I can't do this. And like my legs hurt and my calves hurt and all this. And I tell them, but you did it.
Yeah.
And we are progressing over last week. Last week, you couldn't even run a mile. Like this week, we did too.
Yeah.
So do you feel good about, being able to finish? And this time you didn't cry. At the beginning, they were all crying. And I was like, oh gosh, it's going to be a long road. But they're progressing little by little and they're believing it. But it took someone to tell them like, hey, this is going to be hard. And I know it hurts, but it's supposed to hurt.
It's supposed to.
Remind
no pain,
yourself.
no gain, baby.
Pain, no gain. But remind yourself like when it hurts that the work is happening.
Sure.
Like that's where you're growing and progressing. So just an acknowledgement that it's going to be a long road and it might take long and there's going to be bumps, and be forgiving to yourself and kind to yourself, but also challenging yourself and pushing yourself, because that's where growth happens. And that's where, like it feels the best when you end up meeting those goals.
There was a phrase I heard not too long ago. The top of the mountain is nothing without the climb. So
is
like,
that another one of these posters?
I think so. Maybe. I don't know where I heard it somewhere, but like, having it be earned is going to make it feel a lot better. If it were easy, you would have been done it. But like we are now trying to, set this and start this for ourselves because it wasn't easy in the past and we put it off and now we are like trying to focus on it. So I like that. Just, being aware of the fact that it's going to be challenging. I think kind of piggybacking off of that, also just be okay with setbacks. Like expect that life is going to happen.
Yes.
For example, we talked about it already with like the closing your rings. For me, if you are someone who's like, I need to train every day for however long, and you have a vacation coming up and you're getting paranoid about, oh no, how am I going to stick to my training schedule or whatever?
Real.
Let yourself just, if it's not something you can build in there, that's fine. Just tell yourself, okay, when I get back, I'm going to get back on the horse, but I'm going to like forgive myself for having a couple days, and not even forgive yourself because you're not doing anything wrong. Just allow yourself to like live life without it derailing you, as long as you can, have that discipline to get back on when the time comes, because setbacks are going to happen. If you allow a day or two, or if you have a budgeting setback, a large purchase that was unplanned, completely throw you off, it's going to be really hard to build from there. So just expect those setbacks. Expect it's not a failure. It's just a setback. It's just a road bump. Get over those and,
Yeah, and I think
forward.
especially financially speaking, when you and I give classes, we like usually start the classes with like an acknowledgement that, hey, we've all been through some kind of financial life thing and it's not going to be the last. So I think especially financially speaking, emergencies happen all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I think with our current administration, like there's a lot of things changing financially speaking also. So just being open and flexible to the plan, but then also maybe, thinking about a secondary goal if you can't reach that whatever goal, and having a backup plan.
Yeah, being able to adapt your goals as life happens is super important. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, Michele. I appreciate this. We can be accountability buddies for ourselves this new year. Next time I have the urge to buy hundreds of dollars of the stuff, I'll text you and say, should I do this?
We can manifest our goals over
there
lunch.
You go.
And I'm
there
paying,
you go.
so you don't have to like count that
no
towards your one.
Back. All right. Thank you guys all for listening. That is going to do it for today on Small Talks for Big Change, where we help simplify financial topics to help with your financial wellness. We will see you next time. Patelco Credit Union is insured by NCUA.